All right, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. Thanks for tuning in. This is Eric, and I'm joined by my guest today, Bobby Jaramillo. How you doing, Bobby?
Good, man. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, man. It's good to chat with you again. And for the listeners, we're just going to jump into it. So, Bobby, can you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Bobby Jaramillo. I'm currently in Austin, Texas. But before that, I spent 12 years in Las Cruces, New Mexico, with the Las Cruces Police Department. I left law enforcement as an officer or anything to do was commissioned in 2018. So I've been out in Austin since between Austin and Denver for the last 5 years.
All right, man. Well, thank you for your service, and tell the viewers or the listeners, viewers, what am I saying? What you've been up to for the last few years.
Yeah, man. So when I moved to Austin, I got involved with On It, the supplement company, and the
Yep,
gym here in Austin,
badass.
and was yeah, man, great place. So if you're ever out here again, be sure to come and train.
All right.
But yeah, so I got linked up with them, got really became really good friends with a lot of people there, and really enjoyed their holistic approach to fitness and just health and wellness in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started to adapt a lot of the way that they were doing unconventional training and their methods or their
Mm-hmm.
methodology into my daily training. And realizing that there are a ton of variables into leading a healthy lifestyle, right? It's
Yeah.
not just being in the gym all the time. It's body, soul, and mind, right? So everything has to be tuned up. You know, you're never going to reach the pinnacle. You should always be working towards getting a little bit better.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's kind of been my journey, and then really focusing on the mental resilience and mental health aspect of what happened during my career and how I've really put in effort, or I have put in an effort to really um, cope and just heal myself from the traumas, the stress, the anxiety, the depression, all that stuff that comes with the job that you're very well familiar of with. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey, and now I'm really trying to, you know, make an impact in the community and um, help build better police officers. And that's kind of how you and I got connected. And just
Yeah.
so yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, I love that. And we had an amazing conversation when we first connected on the phone. And just for the listeners, like I was saying with Bobby, I was like, man, we should have just recorded that.
Right?
So
Yeah, that
this
was a
will be a
great
little
one.
different, because we do have a context, and we were able to connect on a lot of things, which is what I love. And that's been one of the positives of this this double edged sword called social media is, I'm able to connect with Bobby in this different place in the country, and just we see a lot of things very similarly with officer wellness, physical, mental, and just the
Yeah,
job and just the approach and approachability of police officers or ex police officers. So knowing the culture and being able and willing to be transparent to talk about all these things and how do we get better as officers as a community. So that might tease into some things. I don't want to go too much down the rabbit hole because I know that we're probably gonna we would probably have an easy time making this like a 2-3 hour deal.
oh
But
yeah,
we're gonna keep the people hungry for more. So um,
absolutely love it.
yeah, let's go into a little bit of your origin story. Like why police? What brought you into it, and tell me a little bit about your career. Some highlights, maybe.
Yeah, man. So every little boy, every little kid, I should say, dreams of becoming a police officer, fireman every day as they're growing up, and it just so happened that I was homeschooled from like
Oh,
beginning, yeah, from
well, you
beginning
don't you don't seem that weird.
I'm not the weird homeschooler.
I love
Uh,
throwing that out there. Yeah.
yeah, man. So I was homeschooled, and my mom was a bus driver, a school bus driver, right? And that was
Oh,
the main
okay.
reason I was homeschooled. She was like, "You're not going to the public schools that we
Oh
live in."
man, she knew too much.
Exactly. And so uh, for lunch, she would come home and hang out with us while we were doing my school. I have two younger sisters, and from that lunch hour, from 12 to 1 on Fox, on the show or the network Fox, Cops
Hmm.
played. And so my
Yeah.
mom, when I was a little kid, would let me watch Cops for an entire hour during my
Okay.
lunch period. And so I think subconsciously it got like put in my head, like, oh, that's your career. Never did
Mm,
I think that was going to happen. I was actually going to school for exercise physiology
mm.
at New Mexico State University in Las Cruces.
Okay.
And I reached about my third year, and I am just not a great formal student, right? I'm not great in school. I'm not like, it just doesn't work out for me. So
Yeah.
I just got bored, and I had become friends with a guy who was working for the department. And I went on a ride along with him, and I loved it. I was like, man, this job's awesome. He was working
Okay.
graveyards. I'm like, this is sick. And it
Yeah.
just so happened that they were hiring at the time. So I put in my application, and then it just kind of snowballed. Like, next thing you know, my application got accepted, and then I'm going through the entire process of the background check, the physical, the like the physical assessment, the psych eval, all of this stuff, and then March 2006, I'm standing in formation outside at like 0530, first day of the academy, and yeah, and so that's where it started. 2006. And then, yeah, I went from '06 to 2018, 8 years as a patrol officer and 4 years as a patrol supervisor. Within those 12 years, I also served as a background investigator, an FTO, force science analyst, an instructor in our academy in firearms, use of force, force on force, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I loved every bit of it. But I got to a point where I was just very unhealthy
Mm.
in a lot of ways, and had to walk away for that purpose. So
Yeah. Uh, was that easy to see? Was it something that you pushed back against, or what were some of the bigger signs that actually helped you wake up to where your health had gone and what you needed to do?
yeah, man, there were a lot of signs and a lot of things that were playing a part in it. And I explained to you is that I was actually going through a demotional process in my
Mm.
department, and we can get
Uh-huh.
into that if you want. I'm not, shy about that. I think you can learn a lot from people's mistakes during those
Yeah.
processes.
Yeah.
And so, with that, led a lot of depression, anxiety, stress. Um, I was not using alcohol in the most responsible of ways. I was just kind of using it as a coping mechanism, a false escape, right? So I would
Yeah.
just kind of go binge drink with buddies, which is the
Yeah.
culture in,
That's
in,
super
in law
common.
enforcement.
Yeah, super common.
And I was probably sleeping like 3 hours a day, maybe, if that, right? Was just not, I was, I think, at like 230 pounds at my heaviest. 30% body fat. I was just struggling, right? And
And
so
your ideal kind of fighting weight would be what for those tuning in?
200, 205 so I was about 30 pounds
Yeah.
overweight, right?
Yeah.
And so, and funny as you mentioned fighting weight, I actually do box, or I did box. And so I would cut down to 185. So
No way.
yeah, so from the 200 mark down to 185. But yeah, that was the occasional thing, but that was already behind me. I was living in chronic pain. I'm not going to lie. Like, I don't know how you guys run up there, but we ran 410s. So um, I literally laid in bed the entire time till I had to go to work, just because I was in so much chronic pain.
Hmm.
Um, and I, I shared this with you in our previous conversation, is that I was on duty one day. It was a beautiful spring morning, and we had an individual who called in saying that he was a 30-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol, and that he was going to take his own life. And so he was actually my neighbor. He lived a couple streets down from me. I
Yeah,
didn't
man.
know him prior to this, but I was in the area. So I jumped on the call, started trying to call him from my cell phone. It went directly to voicemail. So we were able to backtrace his number through our systems and found an address for him. And so it happened to match up. that, you know how those goes. Typically, you don't get the
Mm-hmm.
right addresses, but this one did. So I arrived on scene, and his wife came out bawling, holding a note, and she handed me the note. She's like, I don't know what's going on. Dispatchers are calling, asking if I know where my husband is. And she hands me the note. And I mean, I'm sure you know, when somebody leaves a note, that's pretty much, set in stone, right?
Yeah.
And I started to read the note, and it was everything that he was describing in the note: living in chronic pain, living with anxiety, the depression, the stress, the PTSD, all the stuff that had, 30 years of law enforcement had done to him or brought with him. He was just tired of it. And he, in this note, thanked his wife for being an amazing woman and an amazing mother to their children, and that he wanted to free her of the burden he felt he was to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, man, this is not looking good, right? And as we're kind of trying to figure out like where he could have gone and all of that, we get a call from a golf course, because it was a golf course community, and some golfers called in and said, hey, we found someone sitting under a tree, and we went. It was unfortunately him. I mean, and just talking about it now, I can still envision, and like I can feel everything.
Yeah.
I can hear the birds chirping. It was just a gorgeous day, like really
Yeah.
gorgeous day. And then that, and like I can just still envision him in the way that he was sitting. And I came to the realization that I've never thought about taking my own life or doing any of that, but I sat here and looked at him, or stood there and looked at him, and thought, like, man, am I on the road to where he's at now?
Man.
Like, am I going to get to a point where he felt like this was just too much for him? And so that's when I decided I really needed to make a lot of changes. And first was, you can't fix yourself if you're still just in the perpetual cycle of everything that's harming you, right? You need to be able to remove yourself from that and take a look at the macro of everything, and then start diagnosing them, or dissecting the micro. And so that's when I made the decision that something needed to change. I didn't know exactly what yet. But yeah, that started the journey of my exit process from the police department.
Yeah, man. Thank you for sharing that story. And we talked about it before, but thank you for sharing on this larger platform, because that is the point. That's the point of a lot of this, is just to share that you are not alone, despite how dismal things feel. And Bobby was there, and just to talk about the traumas and the exposures. And man, could you have a more iconic and actual clear imagery of, hey, this is the road you're going toward. This is your potential fate. Do you want to continue on in this book, or do you want to choose another story?
Yeah. It was just, yeah, man. I mean, it's just unfortunate that situation happened, but that was really the eye opener of like, oh man, like, what I need to fix myself. I need to heal myself, right? And then now I'm in the journey of like, I need to contribute and give back and help people build the antidotes to avoid that, because that's a constant thing, So that's really where I'm at now.
Yeah,
what I'm trying to trying to really make an impact in.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that we have so much judgment, and I know for myself, when I was new in the career, I'd hear demotion and think, oh man, how did you mess up, right? And I know now from so many years that a lot of things are complicated. A lot of times it's politics, and a lot of times it's things outside of what a normal person would imagine or understand. At the same time, I think it's worth visiting that to say, hey, this is like, listen to Bobby and all the hats he was wearing. You are a trainer, you're at the academy, you're for science, you're all these things. Like, you are a subject matter expert, you are a high performer to get all these hats and to be this highly credible, highly validated leader and personnel. And so it's not like the stereotypical thing that you think, where it's just like the mess up, the sloppy whatever dude. It's a guy with legit legit exercise education and is boxing, right? But then all said and done, if your health is not in order, if you're not taking care of yourself, this is where you end up,
Yeah.
30 to 50 pounds overweight and not in a good headspace, in a terrible headspace, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that we should actually talk to more people that have gone through those types of situations, right? Because you're right. There's a lot of nuance, and
Hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and say that I did not play a role in that process. Like, I know that I could have done better, right? And being able to acknowledge that, I think, is a huge thing in anybody's journey, right? Like, I know that during the emotional process, I could have been better of a performer. Now, looking at it, like the caveat is like, yeah, I was working countless hours, right? I was working graveyards, I was working the academy, I was going to court, I was going to training, I was putting on training, right? And so I didn't understand the balance and being able to manage that the best way possible. And then again, going with like the personal side of everything was using alcohol irresponsibly. That played a huge role, because I just couldn't catch up. I was just always just burning the candle on both ends. Um, but yeah, I think that it's like going on what you were saying is that, yeah, you can look at somebody who's been demoted and be like, oh, that guy's just a screw up or whatever. And there are those people, right? Absolutely. Every department has them. But yeah, definitely, I would love people to learn from the mistakes that I made and take away something to be like, all right, that's not the road I should go down. Or maybe they're already kind of headed down that road, but there's always ways to pull themselves up. And a lot of the problems too I see is that with departments, when you have somebody like that, they kind of ostracize themselves, but then they're also, admin will have a target on their back, and they're not necessarily the most welcomed in, or I don't know, the culture is just kind of weird. Like there's not great mentorship to help bring somebody back out from those holes that they might be digging themselves, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like the blind leading the blind, because maybe the next guy's he's got his nothing against people who've gotten divorces, but the average cop goes through like 3 divorces a career, and we play a hand in that. Like that other cop's just as bad of an alcohol drinker as he is, right? So we've got these poor mentorships and these poor coaching systems, and I think that there's so many, like we said, there's just nuance and there's so many variables to help bring people back out from the abyss, quote unquote, right? So,
Yeah. Okay. So on that, it jumps in my mind because I'm very involved with our field training process right now. And so for anyone that's even a brand new cop, probably can sympathize with this, but it's very normal for you to toggle between field trainer and field evaluator, right? And so if a
mhm.
student's not doing well, it's really hard not to just start stacking paper, right? You're making notes of everything that is messing up rather than switching that hat back on to be cheerleader slash mentor. Um, from your experience, what would have helped?
Whew, yeah. I think people who were more transparent and authentic.
Mm,
Um, I think that there is a slight bit of authenticity in training. I mean, I think, and this is speaking from my department, right? I don't know. There's a lot of departments out there that I think probably do things very well, um, but I think that there was a lack of authenticity and a lack of vulnerability coming from the field training officers
mm.
or people in those types of roles, even at the academy. Um, and I, it, I mean, I don't know. That's a real hard question. Like if we could solve that problem, you and I would be really wealthy people because we'd package this and give it to every department in
Maybe,
the country.
or no one would listen to us because that's the way it's always been.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, progress hindered by progress. What was it? Progress hindered by uh, heritage or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you hit a big thing there, right? You're talking about transparency, vulnerability. Like these are the things that I think make for effective mentors and leaders and parents and coaches,
mhm.
just humanizing, right? So we talk about humanizing the badge, and we're not talking about TikTok cops, but we're talking about a leader that's saying, hey, you messed up, but I care about you. Let's get you back on track. I've messed up
Mhm.
before too, right? And this is part of why you're here, part of why we're here. And so I know the majority of people that are going to listen to this are newer cops, or their prospective young leaders, and the
Mhm.
newer cops or the people that are applying and want to get a peek in and think about how they can be helpful and healthful. That's really the way to change culture. So
Yeah.
for all you prospective leaders out there, which you are, even if you are taking your tests right now, you are
Mhm.
going to be the police leader of the future. And so heed these words of advice, right? Be what you want to see. Not to be too cheesy, but I mean, everyone remembers those they're bad field trainers or they're bad academy instructors. So then
Yeah.
when they got into that role, they knew, okay, I'm going to do the opposite. Um,
Yeah.
it's literally part of the curriculum for Washington State field trainers right now. If you're a brand new field training officer, you come into the curriculum, the day one is always, let's make a list of all the good qualities of the field trainers you had and all the bad ones. And it's always easier to think of all the bad ones, and everyone has the same stuff. So yeah, your
Yeah.
your department might be a little different than mine, but there's always going to be these themes that, whether small or big agency, East Coast, West Coast, Canada, we tend to understand because a lot of the culture is pretty prominent in good and bad ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, there's no one right answer other than be a good person, and uh,
Yeah,
and
it's that
that's
simple,
hard,
right?
right? I always think of the quote. I think it was Tolstoy that said, "Everybody looks to change the world, but nobody looks to change themselves."
Mm.
Right? And that's really where it starts. I think
Wait, wasn't it
that
Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, that's exactly the great philosopher Michael Jackson.
No, yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Look
Um,
at you. You're not the academic, not the studious one, but you're quoting Tolstoy, so it's
Dude,
pretty legit.
that's one thing I will tell, I think, up and coming police officers or people who are trying to get into this field is diversify where you get your information from, right? I think
Hmm.
that you and this is why I enjoy conversations with you, is because you and I agree that this space has become such an incestuous echo chamber that everything is just regurgitated, repackaged, and remarketed as something new when it really isn't. And I make it a habit to look at viewpoints from people who are outside of like the law enforcement space. And I know it's kind of ironic because you and I are in the law enforcement space and we're trying to like,
Yeah,
we're like, oh no,
yeah,
listen to our ideas and thoughts. But yeah, man, I think I know that I'm very big on like the Stoics, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. Uh, I remember I got made fun of one time. I was in my office and it was a graveyard winter and it's like 2 a.m. It's like 10 degrees outside. There's nobody committing any crime, right?
yeah.
Um, uh, and I had an officer come in, and I'm reading The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, which is a great book. And my officer comes in, he's like, "What are you reading?" And so I tell him, "He's like, why are you reading that?" And that like just blew my mind. I'm like, "Why not, man? Like, why? Like, what's the last book that you read?" Like, I didn't put him down or
Yeah,
anything.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it's just like, oh, well, because I enjoy reading things that are outside of the scope of law enforcement and see how I can take things from those books or
yeah,
that way of looking at life and try to apply it to my profession, right? And so
yeah.
that's one thing I will tell up and coming officers, young officers, is diversify where you get your information and your education from.
Yeah, for sure, man. And yeah, I love that because the Stoics, so you're referring to the Greek ancient Stoics, and I mean, there's a lot of good material, and even like this guy called the Stoic Copper, he wrote a book like that. But
Mm.
if you're coming to law enforcement or first responder work, don't be intimidated by the huge names that Bobby just dropped, because some of them I could never spell that, and I've not read these works. I'm slightly familiar with some of them, but Stoicism is very approachable, and I'm not talking about don't pick up Marcus Aurelius Meditations and just start crushing it. Like it's not going to read like a Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but like literally look up some. I mean, there's even IG accounts, but like look up some quotes, and whether it's Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, just read one or two and just let it marinate. See where your
Absolutely.
mind goes. But yeah, I love Stoicism because we do get exposed to so many negative things, and so many things are outside of our control. So just the recognition and recognizing it's a practice where, hey, you control your emotions and what you do, and that's you have to be okay with that, and to
Yeah.
make the best you can.
Yeah, and it's not to say that you shouldn't have emotions, right? I think too many people think like, oh, that's how you become a hammer and everything is a nail, right? It's
Yeah,
like, no, you should know where those emotions are coming from, and be able to process them and be able to um, compartmentalize them, right? Like, oh, I should be feeling it here and stuff, but not just like putting them away and never thinking about them. It's like, no, thinking about them and processing through them, and thinking of like what makes you think that or feel that way, right? And so it takes a lot of self-evaluation and sitting, like you said, Michael Jackson is the man in the mirror, right? Uh, I've done a lot of digging deep into Carl Jung. I'm a big Jung guy, and
mm,
it's just psychology. He's like the father of the archetypes, and the
yeah,
shadow self is what he calls it. Right, the shadow self is looking at yourself and being like, how crappy of a human being can I be, and am I capable of, and understanding that. And a lot of cops don't do that. Right, a lot of cops. That's how you end up with the George Floyd guys. Right,
yeah,
the guys in the whole George Floyd incident. They were probably, or they are, terrible human beings, right? And they never sat and looked at themselves and really evaluated their potential for becoming the monsters and deciding like, all right, I do not want to become this, right? And so that's we have uh, a big responsibility. It is incumbent on us as individuals in this profession to ensure that we don't become those monsters. One of my favorite quotes is by Nietzsche, another philosopher.
yeah,
He
yeah,
says, when dealing with the monsters, one must be careful that he become a monster, and when staring into
mm,
the abyss stares back.
yeah,
Well, in law enforcement, we deal with monsters of varying levels, right? The abusers, the alcoholics, the druggies, the shoplifters, the murderers, all of these people. Those behaviors start to wear on us, right? And we don't
for
see
sure.
it when we don't if we don't we're not authentic with ourselves and like truthful with ourselves. We don't realize it, right? Like, and the abyss is just us losing complete faith and hope. And I was one of them. Complete the
Yeah,
faith and hope in our structures and administration, our family life, our professional life, and everything, right? Societally. And so it takes a lot to really nowadays to really get through um, a 20, 20, 30 year career in law enforcement, right? And so it is incumbent on you to do this work before, during, and after, to really make it through and really make an impact.
yeah, I love that, man, and it's huge. And I do appreciate that. That is one quote that I was taught in academy, and
Awesome. Love
but
it.
it doesn't. But you'd need those systems or measures in place, right? Because
Mhm.
I was definitely about 1.5, 2 years in on the street, and that's where I was. The abyss was staring back, right? And
Yeah.
I was changing, and I had my friends and family that needed to step up and say, "Hey, man, like you're being a dick." And literally, it took those words and me pushing back and them saying, "No, I'm serious. Like everything you say is you're like it's like poison. Like you're everything you say is negative, and everything you have to say about people is negative." Because I was working graves, I was with a really
Mm.
toxic crew, I was carpooling with a really toxic dude, and so every 12 plus hours a day is just negative, and everyone's trying to hurt me, everyone's trying to kill me, and the people I'm interacting with, no one's like positive, no one's giving me a thumbs up, um, and everything I'm doing is not good enough, for my supervisor, and so it's just this negativity, just breeding negativity, right? And so we see
Mhm.
how toxic, truly that is, how contagious that negativity is, and positively can be contagious, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to catch as quickly like
Yep.
wildfire, oftentimes as negativity. So um, I do like those conversations, especially tying in with the echo chamber. You're talking about thoughts and just we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like these are famous philosophers and psychologists
Mhm.
and thought leaders of their time, and for a reason. So let's learn from those lessons, whether it's ancient times, Eastern culture, Western culture. I love that, man. And recently, I'm kind of inspired because I've been diving into Adam Grant. Are you familiar with him? He's an organizational psychologist, and he speaks and teaches a lot about workplace culture,
Okay.
leadership, and from that perspective. And he's involved with like TED Talks and such. Um, But one of the things he was saying, I actually generated an idea for, kind of like a police workplace article and how that could tie in with mentoring. So I pitched it to Police One that I've been contributing with, and the editor actually gave me pretty quick validation, saying, "Hey, I love that you're looking outside of police, and we
Mhm.
ought to incorporate lessons from other workplaces, because if
Yeah,
it works there, why wouldn't it work with us? And
exactly.
if our thing is so, maybe that's the issue. If it doesn't translate, where how can we find the common ground? So yeah,
Exactly,
man.
right. It's who said, I don't know what the quote, or who said the quote, but it's insanity. Well, the definition of insanity is, right, doing the same thing over and over again and
Yeah,
expecting a
I
different
think
result.
Einstein. Yeah, I think Einstein got credited that.
I think it was,
But
yeah. But I
yeah,
mean, yeah, police culture we've been doing the same thing since like the 70s, man. Like, guys, it's obviously not getting any better. And we have, I was a part of a leadership school, a leadership management school, from one of the big, organizations in law enforcement. And it was just kind of the same stuff. Like, it was just like textbook stuff. I'm like, okay, well, how do you actually apply this? It's one thing to teach me, but then
hmm
going back to our conversation of authenticity, right? Like, you have to be authentic and your true self in order to really implement these things and people to get behind you. Because we all know that one supervisor, that one like sergeant or lieutenant or deputy chief or whoever who understands the psychological behavior, right? And tries to almost like manipulate you into, like, he tries to become that, he starts to become that slightly cultish leader where it's like, oh, I don't know, man, I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid kind of thing.
yeah,
And there's no genuineness and no authenticity behind it. And so, like, yeah, man, I love that you're writing with uh, things, people with like Police One, and being able to contribute your processes that come from outside of the law enforcement sphere. So that's awesome. It's a great start. That's where we need to be, in my opinion.
yeah. Yeah, thanks, man. And I think that, not growing up with law enforcement around me, and it was definitely a culture shift, and that's what I share with my new recruits or people that I'm interacting with, is like, yeah, it's a lot to adjust to. It's a lifestyle change. And I felt like I had to abandon a lot of my old self, but now, maybe because I'm this far in my career and I've been able to be in literally a more creative space, from hiring and trying to see, hey, this didn't work. It hasn't been working. Let's flip everything over and go a different way, has been pretty liberating. So I do encourage those creative minds to think, hey, hold on to that. Like, you're brought in for your values, and utilize that, right? And there might be surprising ways that you can apply that.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right.
Just
So we took a dive, and I was already saying that that this could go a lot of ways. So I'm sure it'd be great to have you back. But I do want to pivot
yeah.
back to the more direct physical training.
Mhm.
You said it yourself, unconventional training, and that's from someone with legitimate education in exercise physiology. So yeah, are you talking about these goofy cannonballs with handles on them and
Yep.
clubs and
Dude,
yeah,
kettlebells are
medieval stuff? Yeah.
dude, kettlebells are
Hey, like, look real
the
quick.
thing.
Look real quick what I got on the floor there. Oh shoot. Can you
Oh, you
see?
froze. You froze. Oh, there it is. I see the handle.
We had a break in the recording, so you might be like, well, there's like literally a second, but no break. But I thought it'd be so cool to pick up my laptop and show Bobby that there's a kettlebell on the ground next to me. But then, because it lost power, it just stopped recording on my end, and it got all upset with me. So we are back. So thanks for dealing with that.
Nah, no worries, man.
All right. So yes, we are talking about medieval implements of strength and
Hmm.
power. So yeah, talk to me about that, and how you found that, or unconventional practices, or on it, or which order, and how that all panned out, and what you think.
Yeah, so we actually did get some kettlebell training in the academy, but it was brand new. So it was 2006, right? The guy who brought the kettlebells to the United States, um, Pavel Sotzolin,
hmm
he brought them in like late 90s, right? So they were just starting to get like some momentum. And the guy who brought him into the academy wasn't like the coolest guy. We were just like, oh, all right,
Was he like the
so
nunchuck guy too?
yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
He was a good, actually a good friend of mine and stuff. But
Okay.
we're,
Good.
when somebody brings something weird, a new like modality, you're just like, ah, it's kind of weird. I'm just used to barbells and dumbbells, right?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I discovered on it in like 2014 that I started picking up kettlebells, and it was through a guy named Primal Soldier, right? One of the audit guys.
Oh
And
yeah. Is that
yeah,
Eric Leha or something?
yeah, he's a good buddy of mine now. I
Yeah.
think,
Oh, cool.
great dude, love the dude to death, man. And that's really where I started to discover like how awesome kettlebells were. We were watching his videos,
Yeah.
and so I started getting more and more into kettlebell training. Obviously, got them on it, and just started to really take in their methodologies. And to give you an example of how effective training with a kettlebell can be, it was just right when lockdowns started happening in 2020.
Mhm.
I had like a 24 kilo kettlebell. And so gyms were closed, so we could only train outside or at our homes. So I had that and a pull-up bar. And in 2 months, with altering my diet and just those two tools, I went from 225 to 195 ish, the 25% body fat, somewhere in there,
Yeah.
to about 17 in 2 months.
Yeah. So that's like
Um,
55-ish pounds for the
yeah,
Americans on here.
yeah, 50, I think it's like 54.2 something or other, right? Whatever. It's
Yeah.
like
Okay.
2.2 pounds per kilo or whatever.
Dang. Good for you, man.
Yeah, so I love kettlebells, man. I think they're the most effective way of teaching people how to actually move. That was one of
Mhm.
my big problems is I was very dysfunctional in my movement patterns, and a lot of cops don't understand that. And we um, are always unload, right? We have a vest. Thankfully
Yeah.
now everybody can wear outer carriers. When I started, we had to be in the LAPD
Yeah.
blue polyester mixed uniforms that are absolutely horrible for you and are trash uniforms. Nobody should be wearing those anymore.
Yeah.
And nowadays, everybody's still, you got the outer carrier, but that limits your range of motion, right? And so once you start understanding like physiology and like muscle and range of motion, you realize that when you are just under load, constant load, like we are as police officers, and your range of motion is very limited, well, you're going to start to just stay that way, right? And we all know that, like the cops, I call it cop back, when the shoulders are rounded forward and stuff. It's called
Yeah.
kyphosis, is the technical term, but I call it cop back because every cop's got it because their pecs are shortened, their rhomboids and their traps are lengthened and stuff. And so we develop these dysfunctional patterns and dysfunctional just movements. And so I found that training with a kettlebell really just fixed all of that because it started to retrain the way that I'm supposed to be moving, right? And I was
Mhm.
able to find better ranges of motion as opposed to a barbell. Barbell is an amazing tool, but I don't think that everybody should be starting off with a barbell. It should definitely be kettlebell use and body weight. So.
Yeah. So, and those that are thinking about kettlebells, there's a million things you can do with them, and I'm not talking about throwing
Mhm.
around like some accounts, which is very impressive, but it's a good way to break stuff in yourself.
Yeah.
Um, don't recommend at home if you're untrained. But even the kettlebell swing, it's a relatively simple movement. There's several variations, but as a
Mhm.
one of my department's trainers, it's one thing that I coach it through, and I see how much people are, they're using their shoulders, they're slowing it down, they're not using the momentum. So that's my leaning. But so I actually kind of shy away for a while before I bring that in. What are your top three movements if someone's going to get a kettlebell? Maybe they start with a
Mhm.
20-pounder or something like that they could start working with.
Definitely getting the swing down to like near perfection as possible, right? Being able, understanding how to um, properly recruit, proper muscle recruitment, right? So it's firing the glutes and then the hammies and the quads and the core and all of this stuff. So understanding that. So the swing is definitely number one. The get up, the Turkish get up, absolute
Mm.
monster. If you can get that down and you just become so stable, right? You want it to be um, uh, to build strength on both sides of your body. Definitely the get up, and then I will say a goblet squat.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, a goblet squat with the kettlebell from with using the horns to to up front and carrying it, you're just going to be able to create a lot of stability and a lot of strength. So those
Yeah.
would be my top three if you had to. And training doesn't have to be so complicated. Like I think so many people these days in the fitness space, right, make it so convoluted that it's just like, no, pick like three to five movements for 3 to 5 reps each, and
Hmm.
have proper rest, but use a moderately heavy 60 to like 80% of your 1 rep max in anything, right? And do it that way. So it doesn't need to be super long, extensive. I mean, we can make you a great specimen physically and like just looking great too with just 20 minutes a day with a kettlebell,
Yeah.
to be honest. So
Yeah, I like that. So just for those that might have sounded really intimidating for some, but YouTube it, right? So
yeah.
the kettlebell swing, Turkish get up, and then the goblet squat, right? So there's a lot you can do before the kettlebell, right? You could use a gallon of water and fill it up a third of the way or halfway, just to
Yep.
get the sense of like, yeah, it kind of droops over your arm like a kettlebell if you're doing the Turkish get up that way. You're not going to drop the thing on your face. Just
Yep.
focus on form, right, and listen to the cues. There's good videos and content out. There's tons of free content. If
Absolutely.
you're going to get a trainer and you're not in the the Austin area where Bobby is, be aware that the trainer that's not keeping you to this extremely strict standard and properly explaining these cues, right? And when I say
Yeah.
cues, it might be something like, "Hey, push through the heels," and that's like, an extra, or visualize, spreading the floor apart, and all these
Yep.
things kind of help people differently, right? To stabilize. If they're not doing any of that and they're not actually checking in with how things feel or how things look or manipulating you and trying different cues, if they're just saying, "Hey, do these jumps, jump onto this box 18 times and run around the gym, and I'll be over here on my phone," and come back and you're all sore and sweaty and pain, no pain, no gain. Beware,
Done.
and that's what
Yeah,
I'll say.
done.
Yeah,
Done. That is the worst. Like the point of a trainer should not be to take pride in like, oh, the person I just trained can't walk for the next 3 days. Like that is horrible.
yeah,
This is like the most like, yeah, you should be a little sore, but you should feel a little bit of it, but that shouldn't be like you still need to go to work and chase bad guys down, right? You need to get in and out of your
yeah.
car, right? You need to
That's
fight
the
somebody.
thing. Yeah, and I love, and I talk to, it's usually younger men. We get really excited and we get really ego driven. The ego lifting.
Mhm.
But many times, even when it took me getting into canine, and I was still doing it. Right, I'd be like, oh, of course I'm going to have a canine track because it was leg day and I'm sore. I mean, what was the point of my leg day then, right? Like I might have to run a couple miles with all this gear on and
Mhm.
lift my dog over a chain link and climb over myself and not drop myself on the chain link. Like, why am I getting my quads this sore and locked up? And so you can
Exactly.
train smarter, so you're deployable, you're operational. And so don't, just do what other people are doing around you. Do what makes sense for you.
Mhm.
Yeah, man. Good point. Okay, so then I guess maybe my last larger question I'll ask you is, do you have any, 2 or 3 tips that you would throw out to someone as they think about nutrition? Because that's so individualized and
Yeah.
personal. It's like a religion. What are
Yeah.
some big rocks people can focus on?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of nuance in nutrition, right? People are on the keto camp, people are in the paleo, vegan. First of all, if you're vegan, I'm sorry. Like,
Yeah, I
let's
am
not do
sorry. I'm sorry as well. But also
that.
sorry, not sorry. Please eat some meat because you're not going to get B vitamins otherwise.
Exactly, right? Or aminos, right? Like amino acids or proper protein. But yeah, so I think again in the nutrition space, it becomes so convoluted. Like it's just my motto is optimization via simplicity, right? And so, not to say that I don't eat, ice cream every once in a while, or pizza, or some like I'll grab a burger from somewhere, whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
But making it as simple as possible for yourself, like I would say, eat as many whole unprocessed foods as possible, right? High protein, higher in the protein end, and also hydrate the hell out of yourself, right? And not just drinking water because you're just essentially washing out electrolytes, right? You need the fluid balance, right? So get yourself some electrolytes in there, and so those would be my top three: staying hydrated, eating high protein, and eating quality nutrient dense foods, real foods. Not to say you can't eat some ice cream every once in a while or a slice of pizza or two every once in a while, because I do. I mean, I ate tacos a little while ago, right? Uh, but yeah, that would be my top three. Is keep it simple, stupid, right? Like
Yeah.
it's really that simple. And then nowadays, it's almost impossible to not eat healthy with so many pre-made, good quality ingredient pre-made meals.
Hmm.
Like here in Austin, in Southern Texas, we have HEB. It's a huge grocery store, and they have ready meals. You can just walk in, grab one, you can throw them in the microwave if you have to, or just salads. Like it's nearly impossible to like not have good quality food readily available to you.
Yeah.
And so, and then we can get into things like I wish that I understood time restricted feeding because I would have done that better as a graveyard officer. Because if
Mm.
you're eating at nighttime, you're just ruining yourself physiologically and stuff. And like you can have a debate with people who probably or who do know more than I do. But my personal opinion is I think that if you're working graveyards, you should eat a great quality meal right before your shift and then fast like you're meant to, like a normal person, your entire shift. But yeah, that's a conversation for another time. You know, we
Yeah.
can dive deeper into that.
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. And like, there's a lot of things, taking notes and things that we could easily dive into. Yeah, it's so individualized. So, trial things. But yeah, simple. Whole foods, like, right? Stay on the outside of the grocery store. If it's going to go bad if you don't refrigerate, then it's unadulterized real food, right? And it's
Yep.
not talking about carnivore, vegan, just eat things that come from nature,
Yeah.
as much as you can, right? The bulk of it, and
Mm-hmm.
minimally processed. Yeah, prioritize protein. I love that. So these are some of the things. I wrote a blog post on this a while ago, but those are, I'm pretty sure, two of the five things I boiled down. Like, hey, outside of dogma, like these are legit things that you can focus on. Keep it
Yep.
simple. So, and just about every officer. I mean, yes, you have all that fast food and graveyard, tempting convenience stores, but most everywhere has a 24-hour grocery store. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whether you grab that rotisserie chicken or the little packets of tuna or some nuts, some fruit, right? Like, it's still real food. So you
Yep.
have options.
Yeah.
Even the
Like I
frozen
said.
stuff. Yeah, like
Yeah.
frozen cooked chicken or
Yep.
sausage, like chicken sausage, and you can microwave that. You have options. So
Yeah. It's all it's like I said. It's a choice at this point. Like there's no reason to be eating. I'm not gonna lie. One of my guilty pleasures is I would get the flaming hot Cheetos, the flaming hot lime Cheetos. Go and get the nacho cheese. Like pour
no,
the
I
nacho,
was I
dude. I
was
would.
worried you're gonna make that Frito pie with that stuff, and
No, I would pour the nacho cheese in the
oh
bag,
no,
shake the bag, and then get a large Dr. Pepper, and that would be my graveyard snack. Horrible. That's
dude.
why I weighed 230 pounds, guys.
Yeah, could you imagine chasing someone after that?
I didn't. I
Yeah, man,
didn't.
man. Well, thank you for, again, vulnerability. You're a true leader, admitting that. So
Absolutely, yeah. Don't do what I did, and you're gonna
yeah,
have a long career.
yeah. Well, Bobby, you are a true human. You're vulnerable. I appreciate all this stuff you've shared with us, and this was a great conversation. Um, more to come, I promise. So, where can the listeners find you?
Yeah, man. So first of all, thanks for having me on. Like, I
Of
really
course.
enjoy and appreciate our conversations. I think that this is what the space needs. So thank you again. And yeah, I'm on Instagram, the Bobby Jaramillo, and that's Jaramillo. Facebook as well, and my website. It's just bobbyjaramillo.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out, give me a follow, whatever. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. Hit me in a DM. If you have any questions regarding training, mental health, nutrition. I am a certified nutrition coach as well, so like strength and conditioning. So any questions that anybody might have, like I'd love to be able to answer them, and maybe we can come back and run it back and talk about those things. So
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Thanks again, Bobby. And I will have your information in the show notes for the listeners. And appreciate it. To be
thanks,
continued.
awesome, thanks, brother. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, of course.